Bringing back the gold standard would be very hard to do, but boy, would it be wonderful. We'd have a standard on which to base our money.
That was Donald Trump from 8 years ago, before artificial intelligence and deep fakes plagued the political discourse. Now, 8 years later, many people are wondering, could Donald Trump hasten the return to the gold standard? We're going to talk about that possibility in this video as we explore. And the first clue as to whether that would happen was really in that statement from 8 years ago. We're going to play a little bit more about Donald Trump's feelings on the gold standard later. But first, let's talk a little bit about what a gold standard is. It's simply when the government essentially links the value of its paper money to its gold reserves. Now, I don't have a gold certificate here, but I do have one for silver. This note here is a $5 silver certificate. It certifies that there is on deposit in the Treasury of the United States of America $5 in silver payable to the bearer on demand. So essentially, that's when we were at least on a quasi bimetallic system to a degree in those days. And this was just back in the 50s when the Federal Reserve was in existence. But this certificate is legal tender, it says, for all debts, public and private. Different than just a reserve note or a United States note like what you see here. And that statement as this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. And since then, as it co-circulated with Federal Reserve notes, now those United States notes and silver certificates are no longer in circulation. And so all they have is just a face value based off the fiat designation, since Richard Nixon closed that gold window totally in August of 1971. So under the gold standard, the government defines the weight of gold connected to a single dollar. A country that uses the gold standard essentially sets a fixed price for gold while also buying and selling gold at that rate. So if the United States were to set the price of gold at $200 an ounce, $1 would equal 1/200th of an ounce of gold. So that's the way to really keep it stable, is for that to occur. But of course, setting it up is another story. It's another situation. We are starting to see now more countries think about it. And the first country to actually do so, to make it work, at least to launch it, is Zimbabwe, that I recently posted a video on. But so far, we live in a fiat-dominated world, a fiat currency-dominated world. Now, we know that these paper notes, even if they are backed by gold and silver, well, you have to actually be able to make it work. It's got to be demonstrable and demonstrative in order to be able to make it work. Because paper money, the evils of paper money have no end, is what Thomas Paine had once said. And Thomas Jefferson, in a letter, said that everything predicted by enemies of banks in the beginning is now coming to pass. We are to be ruined now by the deluge of bank paper, as we were formerly by the old Continental paper. Yes, that's what really ruined the Continental Army during that time when they created these scripts. Essentially, they saw the error of their ways then, which is why the Constitution under Article 1, Section 10 says nothing but gold and silver shall be money. But of course, these days, now we have paper money. And so far as the faith of the public and around the world, it indeed has become money, much to the chagrin of what our founding fathers have said. And as also the evils of this deluge of paper money are not to be removed until our citizens are generally and radically instructed in their cause and consequence. That's what it's going to essentially take, which is why I am a proponent of holding physical gold and silver in our possession. A theft of greater magnitude and still more ruinous is the making of paper. According to what Adams had said, it is a greater because the money there is absolutely no real value. it is more ruinous because by its gradual depreciation during the time of its existence, it produces the effect of which would be produced by an infinitely of successive deteriorations of the coin. He also told Jefferson in a letter that this is to say the infinity of successive felonious larcenies. If this is true, as I believe it, as we Americans are the most thievish people that have ever existed, we have been stealing from each other for 150 years. That is quite prophetic because we elect politicians that perpetuate this scheme, essentially, and a scam to a larger degree. It's like a Ponzi scheme of what paper money is. And of course, you remember the famous quote by Jefferson. He says, "Paper is poverty. It is only the ghost of money and not money itself." Now, that's where I disagree. And why? Because we have made it so through the course of history since 1913, and even beforehand, paper money did circulate. And that circulation and that faith and that trust that we put into it because of fiat, even to this very day, every single gold and silver stacker out there has faith in the dollar. And as you can see examples that you have before you here. We utilize it. We transacted it. It is fungible. Over about 55 to 58% of all international transactions and foreign exchange reserves are in the dollar. It is coveted around the world. But that's the dollar hegemony. And that is not going away anytime soon. So in this sense, it has become money, but it is a very powerful apparition. So this is where I agree with Jefferson, is that the ghost of money, only the ghost of money, but it is not an only, it is a very powerful apparition. But it is a subset of money still, which is kind of amazing that it has lasted this long. But sooner or later, as is the case with every fiat currency, it will eventually die. And so is it possible for the United States to return to a gold standard? Well, before we find that out, let's hear what Trump has to say about this subject in a town hall meeting that he had in New Hampshire back during the 2016 campaign.
Can you envision a scenario that this country ever goes back to the gold standard?
Well, in some ways, I like the gold standard. There's something very nice about the gold standard. And you have to go back at the right time, like when gold does the old crash show. But there's something very nice about having something solid. We used to have a very, very solid country because it was based on a gold standard. We don't have that anymore. There is something very nice about the concept of that. It would be very, very hard to do at this point. And one of the problems is we don't have the gold. Other places have the gold.
So that gives you some clue as to whether Trump would consider a gold standard. It would be very difficult to do. And that's what he said in the previous clip as well. Trump's term as president passed without a return to the gold standard. And the consensus seems to be that it's highly unlikely that this event will come to pass. In fact, let's just take a look here and see, and look at the gold itself. And we know that there was a time when we were on a gold standard, or our money was backed by gold. And as noted here by this St. Gaudens gold double eagle, I believe it's good for every stacker to have one of these. It is the largest gold bullion, gold coin meant for circulation. They didn't circulate widely, but nonetheless, this is sort of the standard bearer. It is considered one of the most beautiful gold coins out there. I'm pleased to have several examples of these in my collection and stack, essentially, because many times in cases they have become essentially a way to be able to accumulate bullion. And I think even nowadays, especially with the price of gold where it is something that could be done, again, to use gold, actual gold coins to circulate, and not just gold-backed or of currency, but that could be utilized as well. Or you could have actually gold backs. The currency itself is made of gold in fractional form like this, where the exchange rate is about $5 for each one of these gold backs that can be transacted. The only way for this really to be totally effective, though, is for people to recognize it and adopt it. And it is happening, and it is happening at a rather incredible rate. It's still going to take quite some time for it to really become something that's going to get people's attention. But this is the kind of what we're seeing. And so this piece here by Investing News thinks that it could be very difficult to do. Unlikely that event will come to pass, even if he takes the helm once again, if he's reelected. Even many ardent supporters of the system recognize that going back to it could create some trouble. As per the Motley Fool's Williams, economists largely agree that moving to a lower key version of the gold standard in 1933 was a big reason why the U.S. emerged from the Great Depression, and a return would be a mistake. But if a future president did decide to go through with it, what would it take? According to Kimberly Amadio at the Balance Due to Trade, Money Supply, and the Global Economy, the rest of the world would need to go back to the gold standard as well. Why? Because otherwise the countries that the U.S. dollar could stand with their hands out asking for their dollars to be exchanged for gold, including debtors like China and Japan, to which the U.S. owes a large chunk of its multi-trillion-dollar national debt. However, the argument to that is, look at what the Philadelphia Federal Reserve did on their recent white paper that I covered. They said it was feasible, and they gave some great analysis down to mathematical algebraic formulas to be able to demonstrate that it was indeed feasible and possible. Now, you heard Donald Trump say in that clip, which is quite shocking, that we don't have the gold. And in a sense, it's true. Even back in 2016, they didn't have the gold. To be able to back up the amount of dollars that have been printed, it would have to be revalued. The fact that the U.S. doesn't have enough gold in its reserves to pay back all of its debt poses a huge roadblock to returning to the gold standard. The country would have to exponentially replenish its gold reserves in advance for a return to the gold standard. Returning to the gold standard would require the price of gold to be set much higher than its currency, or its currency to be revalued much lower. And that would essentially, if that were to be the case, if there was going to be a gold revaluation, it would have to be well above $10,000 an ounce. And that's kind of where Jim Rickards had gotten his price prediction for gold then. But more than likely, that's not going to happen. It'll probably be revaluation to the other side. But it would be very difficult to do. Now, what could they do, in a sense, is create a rules-based monetary system. The best and most realistic option that was ever proposed came from Ted Cruz during the same election season. Ted Cruz was on an interview with Squawk Box and said that we could do a rules-based monetary system with gold being a part. And in reality, that's in a sense, to a greater degree, what Zimbabwe did when they went to a gold standard, because it's not just gold, but it's other currencies and even diamonds. So gold just became a part of a commodities-backed system, as well as other currencies, which in a sense could be considered commodities as well. So I think that is something that we could do here, at least in a percentage of our monetary system backed by commodities at the very least, and gold should certainly play a very large role in that, to be able to provide some sort of way to constrict and to discipline or to rein in the Federal Reserve. They won't just be able to go and print money at will. Their key function should be stabilization at the most. You notice that I said the Federal Reserve, they would still exist, but they would be constrained by this. And that is paramount, because so far right now, they and the government officials are not constrained at all. They print at will. And part of that will comes from us, the people, because we elect these politicians, which is why I have called this indeed money, because of you and I and everybody else that elects these politicians that have continued to prop it up and keep the dollar's hegemony alive. And so the best thing we can do is to have some of our wealth outside of that system, recognizing that the absolute sound and better money is gold and silver as well. Let me know what your thoughts are about this video and this potential possibility. I think there's some chance we can move towards it to some degree. So I'd like to extend a multitude of gratitude to each and every one of you for taking the time to watch, and encourage you to please rate, share, comment, and subscribe.